Hey everyone! So today's video is about me upgrading my wireless access points in the house, well, my Wi-Fi. I was getting tired of running the Linksys router I have out in the living room. It's pretty old. I've had it for, like 2014? 7 years. I had it for like 7 years. Anyways, starting to get really slow. Also, I was running DDWRT on there, which if you don't know what that is, it's an open source firmware and it gets pretty buggy every once in a while. So it's time to finally upgrade, and today I'm going to show you what I upgraded to and how I installed those access points in my house. So let's start by opening up some boxes. Here I have two Unify HD Nanos from Ubiquiti. I picked Ubiquiti because I have experience using their hardware before on drones. No, not quads, drones. Yeah, the real thing. Also, I have quite a few friends that use these in their house as well and are quite happy with them. Before I go unpacking them, let me explain to you why I got two. You're going to want to install these in locations near where you spend the most time in your house, but somewhere near the center of each of those activity zones so that you get good coverage. For me, this means installing one in the living room and another in my office. One thing to remember is that 5 GHz doesn't penetrate walls too well, which is why even though my laptop can pick up the 2 GHz signal from the living room, I opted to get another access point. That way I get the full 5 GHz data throughput while I'm working in my office. So back to unpacking. Of course, on top there's the Unify HD Nano. Under that are some instructions we'll never use again, let's throw those away. And a metal mounting plate to mount these access points to the ceiling. You'll see how that works later. Under that is a power over Ethernet adapter. This is actually another big reason I bought these. I didn't want to run power to each of these access points separately from the data cable. I'd rather just run one data line that carries the power as well. And of course, the nuts and bolts. Always good to have those. Since I'll be running the line myself, I decided why not just cut my own Ethernet cable as well. I bought myself 1,000 feet of Cat6 cable using pure copper wires, which reduces attenuation, therefore reducing packet losses and increasing throughput. So instead of making this video far too long and covering a lot of different subjects, I'm going to split it up for you. This video is just going to be about how I installed it, and if you actually want to make your own Ethernet cables, you can go to this other video up here, somewhere up in that region. Anyway, I'll explain a little bit about Ethernet cords and I'll show you how to make them yourself. Otherwise, you can just buy them yourself. Just make sure you get a cable long enough that it's going to fit. Alright, so all my cables are done. Now it's time to go run them through the house. So first we're going to start with the living room. First step is to get my laser distance measuring tool out to find the exact center of this section of the wall. Why? Well, because according to others, I'm apparently slightly OCD. Which is going to become way more apparent here when I pull out my right angle to draw a line that I'm going to use to make sure that the access point is mounted right in line with the wall. Here's a closer look. You can see that I'm aligning the bolt holes with the line that I just drew, and I marked all 4 holes so I can drill them out. Before drilling, it always helps to punch a dent where you're going to put the drill bit because it keeps the drill from skipping across the surface. So after doing that, it's time for the fun part. Now I need a big beefy hole for the Ethernet cable to drop down through from the attic. And I need to make sure that it's behind the ceiling bracket. So you can see here I mark a line just to make sure I keep that drill bit behind. Now let's prep the hole at the bottom of the wall. I'm using the existing outlet to line up where my cable plate is going to go. I decided to put it here because since there's an existing line running up the wall, I know that there's probably no fire blocks right here. If you don't know what a fire block is, you should definitely go look that up, because if you have them in the wall where you're trying to run the wire, then you may need a special drill bit. Here's the cable plate I picked. It's a single gang width. Yeah, I know that sounds like a made up unit, but that's what they call it. So depending on how many cables you plan on passing through, you may opt for double the width or 2 gang wide. Now the cable plate should attach to a mud plate. I'm holding the mud plate backwards right now just to size it up against the wall, but the mud plate's job is to grip against the drywall and give you something more secure than just plain old drywall for the cable plate to fasten to. In the corners, there are holes where you can leave a pencil mark. And what you should do is cut from each of those markings using a drywall handsaw. I didn't have one, so I just ended up using a jigsaw bit. Time to take a journey through my attic, where I'm going to 1. Run the Ethernet cable, of course, and 2. Secure the metal mounting brackets from the top. Making this path took me longer than I'd like to admit, pushing all of that insulation around. Also, make sure you wear a mask, because I didn't at first and that was a big mistake. I did all this around the time of the Texas freeze before I lost power, so it was extremely cold up there. So as you can see, I'm careful to step only on the wooden beams and never on the drywall ceiling. I weigh a hell of a lot and I'm not risking falling through because no one's going to be able to lift my fat ass up. I did have to watch out for water pipes and electrical lines. I kept tripping over them because they were stapled to the beams, so watch out for that when you're doing the same thing. Here you can see this is where the existing cable runs down the wall. You also notice that I cut out a hole with the jigsaw. This isn't something typical, it's how they built that little theater center in the wall that you saw earlier. You'll see that when I install the office access point, I don't run into the same kind of issue. I forgot to record myself running this Ethernet cable down the wall for the living room, but don't worry, you really didn't miss much. It was just a terrible experience. In fact, it was so bad that I went and bought the proper fish tape for when I do this the second time for the Ethernet cable that's running to the office. Alright, now that I got the cable running through the wall, next it's time to plug in the access point. I make securing this access point look way too easy. It's not. I'm just saving you time. It took me like 10 tries. Now it's time to plug in the power over Ethernet adapter, but instead of staring at this rat's nest, let's go to some cleaner pictures so I can explain how this all works. One cable goes from the router to the power over Ethernet adapter. Make sure to plug it in to the unpowered slot. You don't want to fry your router. Next, the other cable will run from the powered side of your power over Ethernet adapter to your access point. And here's how that ends up looking in real life when you don't manage your cables properly and then you're too lazy to ever go back and clean it up. And if you didn't screw anything up, you should see your access point start to glow a beautiful blue. Okay, now time for the office. Let's fast forward through this part where I'm marking the holes. We've already seen this for the other access point. Here's that fish tape I was talking about earlier. Fish tape is basically like a thin tape measure, which makes it easy for shoving into small enclosed spaces. Here I already have it down the hole. On the bottom, I'm going to pull that fish tape out and I'm going to attach the Ethernet cable to it using a rubber band because I just have tons of rubber bands lying around. But also, it comes in handy because if that cable gets stuck on anything, it's stretchy and you won't snap anything right away. Alright, back to the attic where we're going to gently pull the fish tape back up along with the cable. This actually took me multiple times because this cable kept getting stuck against other things that were in the wall, and I had to repeat the whole process a couple of times actually, so don't worry if you end up having to do the same thing. After fumbling around the cold dark attic, I finally got the cable running over from the living room to the office. Here you'll see I use an insulated staple. It's a great way to do some cable management with those larger, thicker cables, but using the staple gun can be a bit awkward. I ended up hammering in the staple after I stapled it because the gun wasn't too effective. So while we're looking at the journey that this cable makes over to the other side of the house, something to keep in mind when you're choosing which type of Ethernet cable to get, for example a Cat 5 versus a Cat 6 cable, is what its rated maximum distance is. So I got Cat 6, which is rated for 100 meters, which is plenty for my needs. And conveniently, power over Ethernet is rated for about 100 meters as well. As you can see here, the ceiling plate is already in with the bolts in, and I've dropped the Ethernet cable through to the bottom, which means all I have left to do is to plug it in and snap it in place. And as you can see, that beautiful blue light is glowing, which means I may not have messed up. We still have to test if it can connect to the internet. As you're closing everything up and snapping in those access points, you're going to want to seal any of the gaps, and really that's going to be the gaps around the Ethernet cable that you've dropped through the ceiling. To do that, just use some spray foam, spray it around there and kind of get it in to help with insulation. And finally, to finish it all off, after I already confirmed that both access points were actually working, I'll close up the mud plate and then attach the cable plate to the mud plate. And in case you're wondering how setting up the Wi-Fi home network is, I'll show you some of the software steps here. So First, you're going to name the controller. That's going to be the app that's running, collecting all the information about the hardware on this network. So I just called it home. Easy enough. Then you have to set up your credentials. I only had one access point, as you see there, when I tried this out. Otherwise, you would see both listed here. I also carried over the same Wi-Fi name as before, so I didn't have to re-sign in all of my devices. After a final review of the settings, you let it go through the configuration, and everything's up. Here you can see there's a nice dashboard that lets you see all of your equipment, or in my case, the one access point that I had plugged in at the time. Alright, so I hope that was useful for you, and also I hope that the climate in your attic doesn't suck as much as it did for me. Also, get yourself some fish tape. Don't be like me. This stuff's going to save you so much time. Good luck on your own install. Hope this helps, and I'll see you in the next video. Until next time.